Hey, how's it going?
How?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
I can.
Nice. How well? Because sometimes I'm a little quiet.
I can hear you pretty well. Not too bad. I can just turn my volume up.
Okay, hang on. Do you hear any like fan or air conditioner in the background?
No, I do not. Do you hear any in mine?
Nope.
Static? Cool.
Sweet.
So,
Nice.
so how's it going? My name's Tom. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. My name's Dan. Yeah, it's going well. Uh, unfortunately, oh wait, profile. I just kind of want to put my actual profile picture on
Uh,
here. Uh,
what, you're not just a blue little dot? I thought that was you.
yeah, exactly. I'm the blue dot. Uh, yeah, I mean, we can still talk. I'm just kind of doing this in the background.
All right, yeah, no problem.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, so yeah, how do you want to? I don't know. What topic do you want to get started on?
Oh, well, let's just jump right in. I am an atheist, which means I don't believe that there is any evidence to indicate the existence of a God. And I'd like to tell me about what your position is. Do you believe there is any evidence, and can you give me any examples? And then I'd like to tell you why I don't accept that and hear your thoughts on my position.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a good way to go about it. So I guess first and foremost, I am, I don't know that I can say that I'm definitively like theist or something like that, where it's like, I've got this like hard belief that's just like instantiated deep within my soul that God exists or something like that. Um, it's more just that I'm someone kind of just looking for the truth, and that my searching and whatnot has led me uh, to think that I don't know. There's better reason to think there's a God than to think that there's not. Now, yeah, the way I go about it is I oftentimes say that I'm either an agnostic theist or like a tentative theist because I do believe that the evidence points that way, more so than the opposite. But I guess if we want to start out, I just so happen to uh, watch your video on the best argument for the existence of God, or the best argument I think that you could come up for the existence of God. And you said right away that it would be some kind of contingency argument, some kind of cosmological argument. And
Mhm.
I just thought that was interesting because I pretty much agree with that. I do think that cosmological arguments are kind of, I don't know, the way to go as far as those arguments.
Yeah, I
Um,
definitely agree. I think there has to be something that's at least eternal or all powerful in some sense to ground existence as a whole. But I don't see any reason to think that that would lead to a conscious being like a god or theism. Would you say that there is some reason to believe that?
um, I would, but first, I think that as far as those arguments go, like the Kalam argument, the contingency argument, and whatnot, um, I think it's kind of important to keep in mind that those arguments don't typically intend in the first place to reach something like a person, like a mind or a consciousness of some sort. People have kind of made, I don't know, I guess, add-ons to the argument or kind of after arguments to reach that conclusion. The main reason that I would think that this eternal thing is also conscious, I guess, would be um, one, because when when I read something like the Bible and I see Jesus's teachings and whatnot on ethics, stuff like that, the Sermon on the Mount, saying to, love your enemy, pray for those who, do harm to you and whatnot. I kind of just, it seems like that is getting at something that is fundamentally like true, I suppose. And it's very much contrary to, I don't know, I think the public at large, their opinion of what is good or how they act on what is good. Now, I know that's not so much getting into proof or whatnot. So,
That sounds a little bit like the moral argument in a way.
yeah. That I do, even though I like cosmological arguments better than moral arguments, nevertheless, I do have a very large appreciation for the moral argument.
So,
Because, oh, yeah, go on.
yeah, let me tell you my position on the moral argument.
Yeah, okay.
I believe that there can be an objective morality, even if you're an atheist. It should just be grounded in something like an undiscovered super law of nature. So I don't see why that objective morality would indicate a being in any sense.
Right. First of all, I would say, though, a super law of nature, by that, do you mean a natural law? Or do you mean something that is kind of extra natural? Because to say like a super law of nature makes it kind of seem like just a supernatural law.
Well, I'm not sure what the supernatural is. I'm just putting super in there to kind of indicate that it's like the fits the contingency argument that it's eternal or all powerful in some sense. It just grounds everything. So I don't exactly know what the supernatural is, but I'm just trying to attach it to that idea that there is this something that is eternal and all powerful, and that this law is grounded in whatever that is. And I'd say that would
Right.
be like pantheism or something.
And so
So it doesn't need to be a
that's
being.
yeah, that's actually very interesting because it seems like we probably aren't too far away from each other in our views. In that, I mean, if you're affirming that there is some eternal thing that is binding about morality, that is objective and just there to stay, to put it that way, it almost seems, I don't know, like talking about the same thing, just not necessarily a mind. In that case, it would be, in my view, almost like a little bit more like an Eastern conception or something of just like, yeah, this overarching force or something.
Yeah, let me clarify a little bit. As an atheist, I don't believe in any metaphysical theories of everything, but I definitely think there are alternatives to theism that can be like, instead of being grounded, morality can exist instead of being grounded in theism. It can be grounded in deism or pantheism or polytheism or naturalistic pantheism or any of these things. I don't actually
Right.
agree with any of these things, but I
Yeah.
think they're possibilities. So as an atheist, I can say I could still accept an objective basis of morality grounded in naturalistic pantheism and say it exists without a theistic God. I don't
Well,
actually do this, but it's just a possibility that I could
right.
adopt.
I think that I've seen you say that before, but the thing that kind of troubles me is that those aren't like those aren't separate from theism.
What
Like
do you mean?
those are subsets of theism. Like, I mean, pantheism, deism. It's all relating to theism, the idea that a god exists. It's just a more particularized type of theism. It's like the difference between, or the similarity between, like being a Christian and being a Protestant or something like that. It's like deism is a type of theism.
Sure, let me tell you a little bit more. Like pantheism would just be the eternal, all powerful universe, no consciousness. It's just stuff, and naturalistic pantheism would be just natural stuff. Then you have
Right.
polytheism with multiple gods, and a cosmism where everything is just an illusion, and transtheism where there's something above a god. So there's a whole bunch of different variations here.
um, I think the transtheism idea is a funny one, but either way, I,
So the
I
position I'm
think
adopting is the naturalistic pantheistic view, for the sake of argument, which is just that there's an eternal, all-powerful universe with no consciousness. That's essentially what it is.
right, and so with that, I would wonder. It seems like, you know, if you're going to say that something like justice or whatnot is really like, I don't know, morally, truly, objectively, morally good, and something like, I don't know, like murder or whatever you want to take as being morally wrong, it seems like what how could you ground that in just something natural? I mean, I know you don't have to. You could ground it in, like, a lot of people ground it in Platonic objects or whatnot. But if you do take a kind of pantheistic view, which itself I think is kind of strange, obviously, but I still don't see how that could possibly get you objective morality. To just it makes it seem like, you know, if we have a certain state of affairs, if we have um just this situation that we're in, would the view then be that literally it's just kind of brute fact that situation just is good or is bad? And if so, like, I guess I can't see morality as being wholly independent from, like, a person or some kind of consciousness, because to say that, like, some things just are just, and like, or that justice just kind of exists or infuses itself or superimposes itself on certain states of affairs and actions and whatnot, it that to me almost seems somewhat incomprehensible. As in, it's like we can talk about that, but when we actually try to analyze what that actually even means, it becomes extremely just murky and ill-defined.
Well, I see it the same way as theism. I say the morality can be just be like a super law of nature that leads us towards some state of affairs that we aren't currently at, and we are compelled to act in accordance to move towards that state of affairs or something. It's just a super law that permeates everything, and it interacts with our brains and translates into our intuitions, our moral intuitions. And so I don't see any difference between that and the theistic morality. It's just a thing out there that causes us to believe certain things, to act in certain ways, or to perceive certain situations as more moral than others. So
Well,
how is
but
that any different from the theistic morality?
well, the way in which that would be different, at least from how you've described it, is that it seems like that really isn't necessarily touching on morality. Even if if the super law is just a thing that kind of like guides us in some way or imposes a kind of moral view that we all generally kind of hold to, that seems like that's kind of merely um merely descriptive, in the sense of, like, yeah, let's say there's this law that acts on us in such a way that we have a propensity to act in certain ways or whatnot. That still doesn't get you to, like, morality. That just gets you to, okay, we have this inclination to act in certain ways or whatnot.
Okay, so tell me how the theist worldview gets to morality.
Right. So on the theistic worldview, morality is grounded in a person, in the kind of, I suppose,
God's nature?
yes. And I've thought about this before. I've thought about, um, morality stemming from God's nature. And in all honesty, this is something that I have not been able to, like, at least for me, to satisfactorily answer. As in, like, because I think I see where you're going with this, in that, if it stems
How
from
is
God's nature, then would that not kind of be
Why not
the
just say it
same
can
thing
stem from
as,
pantheistic nature, just like it can from a theistic nature?
right? And I suppose I I see the answer, if there is one, as lying in the, or in the, if we're talking specifically about pantheism versus that kind of personal theism, as precisely lying in the personal nature, because of that being, because I just don't think that you can have morality, what is good and what is bad, stemming from something that is not personal. It seems like if there's just a kind of super law of nature or whatnot that just kind of says, or uh, that kind of makes us go towards certain ways of acting, it seems like, well, okay, even if let's say, we grant that, all right, yeah, that can give rise to, say, moral values, but even still, why in the world would I have any kind of, duty to do any of those?
But why do you
uh,
have a duty in theism? What is it that causes that in the theistic worldview?
well, ultimately, because we are created by God, and God himself, as a person, I suppose. Excuse me, I'm losing my train of thought. I do this all the time.
It's fine.
Yeah. Um,
Let's just go with what you've said so far. Why can't
yeah.
I say that pantheism has created us, and what does the personhood add to that makes morality different in some way?
Well, in my thinking about morality, it, it's almost a. I suppose I see morality as inherently personal, such that, like, if you were to have no persons, then nothing would be, like, nothing could be morally good or bad. It seems like it is kind of, in that sense, instantiated, or that's not the
Contingent
word.
on persons.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can grant that morality is contingent on persons in the way it affects people, but that I don't see why that would require it to be originated from a person. It could still just be something that exists that only affects persons. Like maybe there's
Well,
a super law of consciousness or something that only affects conscious beings. So why would the fact that it only affects persons mean that it must necessarily come from a person? Isn't that like a composition division fallacy?
well, the reason why I would say that is, specifically with the idea of duty, because, like, I would not have, even if there is a kind of super law of nature that I am compelled to act in certain ways, that, like, just kind of my psychological state, I'm compelled to do that. There is no burden on me to actually, like, why align myself with, what is kind of like good, stemming from this super law of nature or whatnot.
How does theism account for that duty? How does the duty come from the theistic worldview?
Well, because we're ultimately stemming from a person.
Well, how is that different from stemming from just a universe? What's the difference?
Right. The difference is that now we actually have, the standard is personal, such that we can have like these kinds of duties. To say that we're responsible to someone, we can't, it's like, in what way could we possibly be responsible to like a super law, just a kind of impersonal thing?
Well, I think we could be responsible to like fate or nature or destiny or something like that, some less personal, abstract, but doesn't need to be a person as far as I can tell. I don't think the personhood seems to add anything.
The way in which it adds something is that if you have, a purely natural thing, and or maybe not natural, but just not sentient or conscious or anything like that whatsoever, and we say that that provides kind of the basis for morality, it's almost like me looking at that, I could say, okay, great, I don't really care.
Why can't I say the same thing about the theistic worldview? So we have a morality instantiated by this God being. I can say, why can't I look at him and say, well, okay, why do I care?
I think it is because of, perhaps it's because of the kind of, and I'm using the word empathetic in kind of a weird way, but I'll try and make it make sense. It's that there is kind of a recipient of our actions with that. The actual lawgiver is him or her or itself, a recipient of the things that we do. Not that we like affect it in the way that, like, oh, we hurt it, we punch it, and it feels like, ow, that really hurt, or anything like that. But it's the recipient in that this thing would have made us. It made us to be a certain way. And given that nature of the person who made us, as, God being maximally great and also a person, what we do in response to that purpose or that duty that has been placed upon us really actually goes back to another and affects the other, such that the other can see precisely what we've done and see that we have not. Essentially, they can become very much dissatisfied because they know that we are not following what is properly good. And now, granted, in all honesty, my main area of expertise is with like cosmological arguments and whatnot. The moral argument is something I'm familiar with, but
that's okay. I'm just asking for your opinion. So
oh
just
yeah,
as far as
right, yeah. I don't take it as like, a challenge or anything, like some duel.
So from my perspective, I think we can still have all of the moral duties and obligations from some naturalistic source and have it apply to other human beings. Since my actions will have an impact on another human being, even though that another human being isn't the source of everything, it can still have the same moral consequences without them having to be supernatural in any way. And the grounding for that can just be the fate or the super law of nature or whatever. It doesn't seem that the grounds needs to be personal itself as long as we have personal interactions. So we can still have the objective morality being a non-conscious being, but the moral actions and consequences still happen between our human selves.
Right. And I suppose what I see with that view, I can't help but feel when I look at that view that it is a kind of I don't know. It seems perhaps it's because of a lack of reflection on this on my part. And what I say next is purely kind of biographical or psychological or whatnot. This isn't intended to be like, me stating any actual problem with what you've just said. But when I look at that, it seems like that is an attempt to just kind of slap on to the universe and give properties to the universe that in principle are obscure.
I totally
In
agree,
that,
but from my perspective,
right,
I think that's exactly what you're doing with theism, and I'm essentially just copying what I see you doing and applying it to the pantheistic worldview. As an atheist, I don't agree with any of these. I just think you can do the same
right,
thing.
right. Um, and again, the reason why I think it's unintelligible on like any kind of, whether it's like atheistic moral Platonism or something like that, which I see as pretty similar to like grounding morality and pantheism. The problem I see with those is precisely not the problem with a personal theism. The reason I see it as unintelligible is because it simply, to me, to say that the universe or whatnot, just kind of things just are good or just are bad, and that is somehow fundamentally like infused into the fabric of the universe. It's like, what does it mean for a moral value or whatnot to be infused into the universe precisely because the universe on pantheism or whatnot, it is not itself personal. The reason why I see it's that the personal theistic view is much, much better is because this is kind of a like thing, essentially, a like thing to us, telling us what is good or bad or whatnot. I do see the personhood of the thing as being almost, in a sense, this might not be the right word, but in a kind of metaphorical way, maybe, I see it as more like trustworthy in that sense. As in, were you about to say something?
Yeah, it reminds me of the Euthyphro dilemma. I'm thinking of, well,
Right.
how is this? How does the God give us morality? I mean, is it the God's choices? Is it its or is it grounded in something further? Its nature doesn't really have a choice over what morality is. It's morality is determined by the thing's nature, and if so, I don't see any difference because the personhood is only a reflection of the morality given by God's nature, which God doesn't have a choice over, which seems no different from saying morality is just a fact, a
Right.
brute fact.
Right. I think that to separate, to say that, like, I don't know, God and God's nature, I think that the two are connected such that you can't, it's not like you have God's nature, which then kind of makes God a certain way or makes God command things or think a certain way or something. I just think that his nature is, in that sense, kind of identical with him, just like
Well, yeah, obviously, if his nature is
right.
him. But so could God command us to do something immoral, or could God lie?
I do not believe so.
So then
Well,
his nature
I
is then preventing him from taking certain actions, isn't it? Doesn't
no,
that mean?
I think with can he lie? If we're talking about that in terms of autonomy or like power or something, certainly he has autonomy to do that. Like he has the resources available to him and the capability to lie. But as a matter of fact, I believe from his moral nature that he just, as a matter of fact, will not lie. He
So
has
his
he has the power to.
sure. So his
Right.
nature determines his actions, and so his nature seems to precede them in some way.
I don't think so. You know, this is funny because this reminds me a lot. I don't know how much if you're familiar with like the philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty.
No, I don't think so.
He's more like continental philosophy rather than analytic. But he has a big book called Phenomenology of Perception. And I think it's very interesting. He goes into the idea of, well, he touches upon the idea of things like having a nature or whatnot. And I'm that's I was about to say an oxymoron. I'm kind of convinced that he's right in thinking that like when we say that, you know, if you're phrasing it as God's nature kind of stands behind God and compels God or directs God in his actions such that it's like a thing, a force that is kind of disallowing him to lie or to do what is morally bad. I think that that is the wrong way of viewing. I think God's nature and probably just nature in general. Um,
Can you explain that more? I don't really understand because the
yeah,
way I
yeah.
understand a nature is that your nature is, um, given any random set of events, your nature will compel you to take action A over action B. So it seems to me like your nature is the foundation of who you are and is going to tell everyone else how you're going to act or something.
And now that must be. Are you a determinist then?
Um, a methodological determinist. As far as I know, everything's determined. I don't know what it would mean for it not to be, except for randomness. It's either determinism or randomness, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's fair. So then either way, lack of like free will
Yeah,
and
I don't even
whatnot.
know what free will is. I have never heard a coherent definition.
Okay. Um, I suppose perhaps then, um, certainly my view of, you know, uh, God's actions or whatnot. If we start out that free will doesn't exist, then that probably
So that would
that
be the
would.
core of the difference is that you believe that the free will thing is how his nature or how his actions can be not controlled by his nature because he has some kind of free will stuff.
Well, I think that well, yeah, the free will would be kind of like the big difference in this case.
Okay, can we talk
The
about free will then? Because I'd like to just present to you my position on free will and hear your
Sure,
thoughts.
I would love to. I haven't thought a ton about it, but I just love that topic. So I would absolutely love to go into that.
Okay, so for my position, any choice that we either make it for reasons, in which case the choice is determined by the reasons and you have determinism, or we make it for no reason, in which case it's random. Now, I see nothing you can add to that that can change that. So either you have determinism or randomness, and I don't know of anything you can add to get free will.
Right. There, I don't know that there is a kind of like, I don't know, extra variable that you can put in to kind of get around that, a kind of set static thing that you can put in there as its own variable to get around that. But I think that the nature of freedom is such, is kind of like a power to um, initiate new causal chains. I've been thinking about this idea of just will or intentionality or whatnot as something that certainly, I mean, our experience of that, of having intentionality and like aboutness, like thinking about something or whatnot, and wanting wanting to do something. So like volition, if I, you know, if I want to move my hand or my arm in a certain way, I can choose to do that. Or, and I mean, you would probably disagree with the strength of the word choose that I'm using, but for all intents and purposes, we experience to such a great degree that we really do, like when I say, okay, I'm going to move my arm up now, and I move my arm up, I think that every single case like that, our experience cries out that that was not just the kind of like, there was nothing forcing me to do that. I could have not done that, and yet I did it. And to me, I would appeal largely to experience, just in that it, not in the simple sense of like, you know, we see this happening all the time, and so probably it's, I don't know, it's not an inductive thing, but it's just the core of our experience. It seems like free will is a kind of properly basic thing, as Plantinga would put it, that it is something that is just so fundamentally embedded in our experience that we're certainly warranted in believing that there is such a thing as free will,
I can
unless
show I can show every human being a picture of an optical illusion, and they'll see it moving, and that we can consider that properly basic until we have evidence to the contrary. But we know they're not moving, so I don't really take experience of the thing to be very meaningful for me until we have an actual definition of what it is. And all the words you use, like intentionality, volition, choice, freedom, those all seem to fall into the same dilemma as free will. It's like if you have intentionality, well, was your intentionality done for reasons, in which case it was determined, or was it done for no reason, in which case it was random? And you can just take out all of those words and put them through the same process and say, well, what can you possibly add to that to make them free? How are they free in any sense? Because as far as I can tell, based on any conceivable definition, it's always going to be determinism or randomness.
and as in the sense of you either
Did it for reasons and it's
right.
determined by the reasons, or you did it for no reason, in which case it's random. And so I don't know of any way to balance that, because the way you keep defining free will as being some kind of volition or freedom, that seems kind of circular to me. You're just taking the word freedom and taking a synonym and putting it on the other side of the equation. Freedom is freedom.
Right. What I meant by using the words like volition and whatnot and choice is to refer to our experience of it, because we certainly experience ourselves as having this capability, this further than just being like the recipient of already established causal processes and whatnot, being the recipient of just external or like internal biological stimuli or whatnot. On top of that, there is another layer of our experience, And I know a lot of people don't really, take experience or whatnot as a barometer for truth or something that can provide evidence or whatnot. But I think that there is a certain level of experience that, and again, this goes back to the proper basicality thing, where the difference between free will and, say, like an optical illusion is that every time when you look at these kinds of optical illusions, like the one you're talking about things seeming to move and whatnot, there is a distinctive quality about those illusions when you look at them that you know that something is off. Like an illusion that is made to look like something is moving at a certain point has this kind of disanalogy of experience where
Dissonance.
yeah, I suppose. But I was thinking like disanalogy, if we want to make free will and these illusions somewhat analogous, or our experience of free will and these illusions somewhat analogous. It seems like the analogy breaks down because our experience of free will is really truly of being free, and like when I make the decision, it seems like I really just am free doing that. Whereas with the illusion, the best I think we can say is that it looks to an extent like it's moving, but there is always that thing present, that kind of weird indeterminate state when looking at an illusion where it's like, well, it seems like it's moving, but something also is off about it that makes it kind of seem like it's not moving.
Well, I'm
And
not sure I
that's
would agree with that, because I think definitely that applies for some illusions, but I think there are many where it actually, like, I'm sure there are certain kind of distance illusions and color illusions where it really seems like they're different colors, but really they're the exact same color, and we can't at all tell the difference because of problems in how our brains process vision and things. So there seems to be lots and lots of illusions that we really genuinely feel look the way we perceive them, even though we're wrong. But my more fundamental point is that how can something be properly basic, as you put it, if you can't even define what it is? It just seems to be some kind of, here is something we can't explain and we can't define it. And so you just insert this feeling of freedom. So we can't explain X,
right,
therefore God, essentially, an argument from ignorance, or therefore free will. But it seems
right,
like
right.
just something we can't explain. How could you possibly therefore say it is this free will thing? Why couldn't
Oh,
it be
right.
like evolution or a
like
natural process that we don't understand?
like with Socrates, and how will you look for it, Socrates, if you don't even know what it is?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I think that when it comes to free will, for me, the defining factor of free will is the idea that in a certain situation, I actually, really, truly have the capability to act in one way or another. Because, and I use the word capability in a way that is sort of meant to be kind of similar to the word like autonomous or autonomy. And I know probably you're going to say that, well, autonomy is kind of just one of those other words that like is simply equated with freedom, but it is
Yeah.
this ability to, or how I would think of it is that it is this ability to start new causal chains rather than simply being the recipient of past, the causal chain that you're, I suppose, currently going along or whatnot.
So let's go
It
with
is,
that your analogy of starting a new causal chain. So
yeah,
if I'm going to start a new causal chain, that seems essentially synonymous with a choice. I've made a choice to start a new causal chain of some kind. Would you agree with that?
yeah. I think that is what would be going on
So the
if you took
choice, was that choice determined by reasons, or was it done for no reason?
I
So
I I don't think that it was determined by reasons, in the sense that I don't think that when you have reasons for something, that those reasons somehow force you or activate the things within your body that bring about, you making a certain choice or whatnot. I think that reason, and this also goes back to kind of my conception of like the self or whatnot, or being a person. But reason directs you towards a certain way, but it does not make you go that way, such that they can, essentially it boils down to reasons are like, or are similar to, or lead to tendencies. And this is another thing that Merleau-Ponty talked about a lot with tendencies, in that it, take the example of, actually, I have the book right here. Um, take the example of, say, like, uh, really, really self-deprecating actions, or like me. Let's say I have really, really low self-esteem, and I've kind of built up this complex of just low self-esteem for the past 20 years. You might say that it is really just ingrained as a part of, my person or whatnot. And now the tendency part differs itself from determinacy, in that in a given situation, where, let's say, I could be self-deprecating or do something that is obviously reflective of my being like self-deprecating or low self-esteem or whatnot. In any situation where I could express those things, those uh, perhaps the ideas that I have about myself, I don't necessarily have to follow along with that tendency. I can choose, in a sense, to not act in that kind of way, or to, yeah, let's see, trying to phrase my words right here. But in any given situation, I always am kind of oriented towards a certain thing, but that orientation does not itself make me go and do that thing along with the lines of those orientation.
okay,
Um,
so let's go with that. Let's say we have reasons, and these reasons give us a tendency, but you don't have to accept the tendency. How do you reject it? Is it more or different reasons, or is it
what do you
random?
mean? How do you reject what?
So you have reasons that give you a tendency to like be self-deprecating or towards suicide or whatever, and you said you can choose to not do those things, to not be self-deprecating.
Right.
How do you choose to do those things? Is that choice determined by other reasons, or is it have no reasons at all? Is it random? How do you?
It 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 could be that other reasons tend you towards certain things, but it could be the main thing about freedom and free will is precisely the rejection of this requirement that like to act in a certain way almost means that you could not have acted in another way. So that if I say that I have a reason for doing something, in my view, that, you know, the reasons don't get the final say. It's, I could have reasons for doing this, reasons for doing that, and then just say, no, screw it. I'm going to sit where I am right now, starve myself and die. Just like not make the decision. Almost like the, I don't know how to pronounce it. I think it's Buridan's ass or something. The donkey who like is directly in between, for the sake of the story, I'll just say two equal piles of food. It's the same food and it's the same amount of the food, and they're the same distance away from that donkey. And the kind of, it kind of ends comedically where it's like, okay, so the donkey is there. He has no reason to prefer one over the other. So because of that, he'll just kind of sit there and die in indecision. And with my conception of free will, I guess it would be characterized by this rejection that to act according to reasons is the same thing as being determined by those reasons and whatnot, such that free will is that thing, that deciding thing, which says, yes, I will do this. No, I will not do this. And though reasons undoubtedly influence that, the free part of it is that I am there essentially agreeing. So like if I have a council of people and I'm the president or whatnot, or just the leader of a group, and this council brings me information on, you know, the course of action that I should take and all of that, and they're pretty much unanimous on it. They know exactly the direction that I should go, and they bring that to me, and I look at it, and I say, yeah, okay, I'll do that. I'll definitely do that. I definitely do not think that you could say that the fact that all these people, you know, got back to me and gave me all of this kind of concordant information that is, you know, it's in concord with everyone. They're all saying to do the same thing. Even that, I do not think you could say that that determined me or whatnot to do that action. Now that's slightly disanalogous because you can say, well, there could be another factor of like not wanting to disappoint people or whatnot. But the point though is that the reasons that I have for making an action are somewhat like those people bringing me just their best rational assessment on what I should do. But then there must also be something saying like doing the agreeing or saying affirmatively, okay, yes, let's go through with that. Yeah, pretty much. I guess that's what I would say. It ultimately stems from where I'm coming from is that, like I said, I don't think that acting according to reasons is the same as being determined by those reasons.
Okay, so when you make this choice to accept all of the reasons that the people have given you, how do you do it? What is this? What is causing this choice? You say it's free will, but can you explain to me analytically how does that happen? Because either you're going to do it because of something, you've chosen this for reasons, or again, you've chosen it for no reason. If you've chosen it for no reason, it's random, but I wouldn't call that free will.
Right. Certainly randomness I would not equate with free will.
So when the people bring you the information and you have to make this choice,
Yes.
how do you make the choice? Is it for reasons or for no reasons? What else is there? What can you possibly add to this that can
Right. So
explain what that choice is?
right. I make the choice for reasons, right? I do that. I take the reasons, think about them, and I see that, oh yeah, okay, there are good reasons here. But what I'm saying is that the reasons themselves do not make you do things. The point is that to say, like, if we're talking about free will and we say, well, what causes you to choose this rather than that? The whole point of the concept of free will is that there is no, like, explicit, like, just demanding authoritative cause of why you choose this rather than this, other
I'm
than
asking
just
the
yourself.
inverse question. What is the freedom? How are you free? What can freedom possibly mean? What can it mean to be free? Like saying you make a choice, that's just freedom is freedom. It's circular reasoning. So tell me what this freedom thing is. Because as
Well,
far as
no,
I can
I
tell,
don't think it would be circular reasoning if I was trying to say that, like, we choose to do things, therefore, like, we are really free. Now, it might have sounded like I did that a little while ago, but the choosing and volition and whatnot kind of just went to showing that we experience that we are free, and then I would try and work from the experience. But either way, the freedom is the choice. You're right. That is true. Um, and so, what is freedom, or what is free will, is just precisely this ability to not be strictly, you know, defined and controlled by outside factors.
so what
Or
I just heard was you just said freedom is freedom is freedom is freedom, and you still haven't defined freedom because from what I can tell, you've just taken the word freedom and replaced it with a synonymous term of choice, which is a synonymous term of making a choice, which is another synonymous term. So you haven't actually defined what this is, as far as I can tell.
Well, I think that as far as language goes, you reach a barrier where you kind of have a philosophical primitive, where it's like freedom. The best way I can, I suppose, analogize freedom or whatnot, it is to appeal to experience, and our experience of being autonomous and whatnot. And now, by that, it is that even if I might not be able to give a kind of, like, further reductive, description through use of different words of this, nevertheless, we certainly know. It's almost like the word religion or whatnot. Like, when you actually get into philosophy of religion, that is extremely difficult to literally just kind of pinpoint down. But nevertheless, we can still talk about religion and whatnot, even because we know the sense of what it is that we are talking about. And so when I say that free will or whatnot is this kind of, it can at least be represented by this experience we have of being autonomous and making choices and whatnot. Perhaps I might not be able to, or maybe it's even just on me. Maybe it's just a lack on my part of, like, just I can't you know vocabularize it, if you want to put it that
Well,
way.
to be fair, this is not just you. all of the apologists I've talked to, I don't think anyone's ever been able to define free will. It's not just you.
Yeah, and well, and certainly I'm very resistant to the idea of like, being quote unquote an apologist. Because I certainly, my goal is not to, defend a worldview. My goal is pretty much, I see that a certain argument or premises or whatnot just make more sense than other things, and I look into those and see like, okay, why do I think these make more sense? Why might these actually not make more sense when you look further deep into it? Stuff like that. So for me, I really, I kind of have no.
Okay, yeah, it was unfair of me to characterize you.
Yeah,
That was just
that's okay. That's all
slip of the
right.
tongue on my part. So, but
Yeah,
going
no,
back to free will,
and like I don't blame you that much for it, because in all honesty, most people who post the videos like what I post would also probably consider themselves apologists. So
going
I
back to
can't
free
really.
will,
Yeah.
uh, you said that there are these philosophical primitives,
Right.
and we can just use these as kind of like a properly basic stopping point. But how is that different from me just picking something I can't explain and then saying, I have an explanation of Mughals. The Mughals exist and explain this thing I can't explain. Well, they're just a philosophical primitive, and I don't have to explain them anymore. Why can't you just do that with any idea anybody can just make up?
Right.
Is that just
The
all
reason is that
arbitrary?
right. The reason is that when we're talking about, we share. I think the thing that helps about this is that we share this same kind of experience of when I get up, or when you get up and walk somewhere, that you have not yourself been forced. There has not been some outside thing making you go do that.
So let me use another analogy. Like we all experience hunger. Now
Yeah.
we have two ways of approaching this. We could say that hunger is just this philosophical primitive, and there's no further explanation of hunger. It is just a super something or another. Or we can say maybe this can be reduced to biological processes. So why is your explanation that it's some philosophical primitive a better explanation than saying it's probably reductive?
Oh, well, I first of all don't think that hunger can be reduced to merely biological things, just because I do believe there is an aspect to hunger that is, at least human hunger, if we want to put it that way, that is experiential. And I do not believe that, I'm not a property dualist. Well, I don't know. I lean against property dualism, and like physicalism. Um, so I guess I would just reject that hunger in and of itself. I would characterize hunger as being, at least in part, characterized by an affirmative desire, or wanting, or that kind of a thing, just for food or whatnot. And when I use, if we're to ask, like, what do I mean by desire? I mean, I suppose I could try to further define that. And
Well, would you say the
um,
same thing about pain and pleasure, physical sensations?
yes.
So so what is your position on consciousness? Like, for example, you have materialists who think that the material world, that consciousness is a product of the material world, and you have idealists who think that the material world is a product of interactions in the mind, and then you have dualists who think that these are two separate categories of things. What is your position on consciousness versus the material world?
Right. My position, tentatively, is, more, more a spectrum, not a spectrum, but a, limited range of things. I tend towards, rather than saying that it is this one or the other, I would say I am more inclined to be either a monist, that all of these just are ultimately fundamentally the same thing, or substance dualist. And in my view, the only real difference between substance dualism and monism is that substance dualists think that these distinctions between mind and body are fundamentally like there, that
There's
just
two different classes of stuff.
ontologically, yeah. Whereas monism or whatnot, or the kind of monism that I would be inclined toward, would be more that there are legitimately these different things, like facets of experience or whatnot, or
Like roses and tulips, there's two different things, but they're the class of the same flowers.
not quite. Almost like how I can say that, like, my desk is white and my desk is solid. That kind of a thing, where it's like, I don't mean that like solid and white are the same thing, obviously, but just that the thing that contains what we would call whiteness or solidity just is one thing, which is the table. And so that is the kind of monist view that I might be inclined towards. But again, I tend to be very, I suppose, agnostic on pretty much all of those matters, in that I have kind of no beef to carry.
Well, I think it ties into all the things we've talked about so far. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Certainly. Yeah.
So
yeah.
So you're saying that there's two different things: the solidness of the desk and the color of the desk, and those are two different properties, but they are of the same thing, which is the desk. That seems to me to be dualism, because you're saying there's these two different types of properties and they are separate types of properties, even if they describe the same thing.
Right.
And so you would say that the consciousness and the body are two different kinds of things. That's what you're saying?
I would say that if I were a substance dualist, then yes, I would say that. On monism, I would say that it's not necessary. I would think that the
let me phrase it in a different
distinction.
way.
Well, wait, I know exactly. I know exactly where I'm going with this.
Right.
On monism, there is still this same distinction, except that I think on monism, it is something that is imposed onto, how we view things. So it's the difference between physical and mental or whatnot would be on monism, it would be something that a kind of category, a kind of box that we would place these two distinct types of things into, but it would not necessarily be literally like fundamental, if that makes
some
sense.
other fundamental thing, and that other fundamental thing is what consciousness and the body are both a product of.
Or not just that they're a product of it, but that they are it.
So there's a third category that we just don't know about yet.
Oh no, it's not. It's not a third category. The monism is precisely kind of what you get when you put.
Well, monism is just there is a single substance.
Right.
And some monists think that that substance is just consciousness, and the physical world is a product of consciousness. Those are idealists. And there are some monists who think that the the external world and physical stuff is the fundamental nature of stuff, and consciousness is a product of the physical world. But what you seem to be saying is that there's this other kind of substance that produces or results in both consciousness and the external world.
It's not. This again gets to Merleau-Ponty, and I know I reference him a lot, but the kind of monism that he would think of is not like this, either everything is physical and in that sense it's one substance, or either everything is mental and in that case it's one substance. What he would say is that this distinction between physical and mental or whatnot, on his monistic view, these distinctions are not like real, actual ontological, objective distinctions. They're things that we as conscious beings kind of impose onto the situation. We have this almost like a spectrum of I don't know whether you want to call them properties or just ways of being or just types of being or whatnot. And he would say that there is this one thing, or he might say, there is this one thing that just is these two things, physical and mental, simply without the artificial barrier between them that we have imposed on it. That they literally, they're almost, if you think of like...
So like my example, you can think of as like tulips and roses are both different kinds of flowers, but they're still both flowers.
Kind of, except it's more like... It's more like, I suppose, the substance dualist would say, we are, if we want to put it, 1 plus 1. The monist, or the kind of Merleau-Pontian monist, would say that we are 2. That's kind of the distinction I'm getting at, where the substance dualist, in this case, the 1 plus 1, this would be representative of both the physical and mental. So one of the ones, you could almost do like 1 subscript 1 and 1.
Well, a dualist would say they're 2 different things. I wouldn't say that you can add them together.
Could you repeat that?
Well, I'd say the dualist would say those are 2 separate things. You can't add them together. They're not related. They're just 2 separate things.
Well, they are 2 separate things which interact with each other. They do come into contact with each other in the form of us, or like a physically instantiated person with like a body and a mind. So they would say that they are conjoined in some sense, but that the mental aspect and the physical aspect are, those are really 2 actually different things, but in some way, which I still have yet to see, in some way they can interact.
And what are you saying? The monist position says they are not 2 separate things?
Right, exactly. They are not 2 separate things, but they are themselves just intertwined such that they're both on a par. It's extremely hard to articulate, but it is, if we imagine 1 plus 1, where 1 is, and this is the substance dualist position. The first one is matter. The second one is mind. The plus is kind of the expression that they are interacting or connected in some way. But there is one distinct thing plus another distinct thing. Now, in reality, that equals 2. That just kind of is the end result. So the end result of monism, or the Merleau-Pontian monism, and substance dualism is ultimately kind of the same. It's just that one thinks that, yeah, there are like 1+1, and the other just says, no, it's just two in its two-ness. Like when we say two, we are referring to something. The way we're characterizing it is different than if we were to characterize it as 1+1. We are referring to two different conceptions, even though, obviously mathematically they equal the same thing. They get you the same result.
I don't understand the difference you're trying to make between the kind of monism you're talking about and dualism. It just seems like that's just dualism.
Right. The dualism, the signature thing about monism is that monism does not see the whole two as itself being the mix or the bringing together of one fundamental substance with another completely distinct fundamental substance. They would say that we have the whole two, and that the distinctions we make between physical and mental are themselves not part of objective reality, but are simply the way that we categorize them. So that we have, it's like we could also do it the same way. So like if we imagine the monist view as just like a box, just a two-dimensional square. Wow, I shouldn't have said box then if it's two-dimensional, but either way, imagine a two-dimensional square. That would kind of be the monist view. Just like, okay, yeah, that is it. We are us. And then you can change that kind of two-substance dualism by kind of just drawing a line or cutting a line through that square. And now the substance dualist is going to say, well, we have this one thing on the left that is coming together with this one thing on the right, and it's making this. And they're two fundamentally different things or items that are coming together, but they make the same thing. Whereas the monist would say, no, that line you're drawing there is not itself fundamentally there. It's a line that you have drawn yourself.
So what that sounds like to me is like if you imagine we have a jar of marbles, half red marbles and half blue marbles. You're saying that, well, the red and blue, those are just frequencies of light that we impose, that we don't actually see those. It's just all marbles. Is that kind of like what you're saying?
Kind of, except the monist is also in this weird position of affirming that while you cannot kind of like completely separate one thing from the other, even though you can categorize it that way, ontologically you can't separate them. Nevertheless, those, it's like those that separation we make is not necessarily arbitrary. That like there is some kind of difference. Like if we imagine a spectrum of colors or whatnot, where like the entire spectrum, or no, even better, a circle of colors, just like a color wheel, which all blends together, where the red ever so slightly bleeds into the orange, and the orange bleeds into the yellow, and bleeds into the green, and all the
gradient?
way. Yeah, the gradient. The monist would view us like that, where the monist would say, okay, yeah, we can kind of like cut a line through this gradient, somewhere through this gradient of colors, and recognize the fact that what we've got on one side of the gradient is legitimately different than what we've got on the other side of the gradient. But they would say that ultimately the gradient is itself the thing. Like that is representative of what we are, and the division between it is something that we impose, even though in a strange sense the two sides do have, almost to put it in maybe the best way I can, just different ways about them, even though they are fundamentally at rock bottom part of the same one thing. And now I know the only reason why the only reason why I'm a little hesitant to agree with the analogy of like the flowers, flower as a thing versus like tulip and rose. The only reason I'm hesitant to do that is because it seems to me in that case that what you have there are two different things. Like you have a rose and you have a tulip. And they share in one common nature, which I don't know that the monist would say that necessarily these two things share in like a common nature, where the nature is thought of as like describing some way that the two things are, some commonality between the two things. Because admittedly, on the monist view, the line we cut between what we call physical and mental, it's not like those two things are that they share something in common, which is this higher up thing. Well, essentially, the only thing they share in common is that they are like part of the same thing when we're thinking of a thing like oneness, not a thing in like a mode of being, but just a thing as in like an object, a one unified thing, like a cup or a table or something like that.
Would you mind if we take a break for a minute? I gotta go to the bathroom and
Oh
then
yeah, that's
come back.
fine. Yeah.
I'll be back in a minute.
Alrighty.
All right, I'm back. Are you still there?
Yep.
So let me tell you a little bit about my view on the internalism externalism difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I'm imagining a unicorn, I don't experience a unicorn in front of me. So there's some difference between my imagination and my experience. I'm going to call that the conceptual empirical distinction. I know there's lots of things that we can imagine independent of our experience, like math and logic and theories and unicorns and all kinds of things. And all of those are going to be conceptual stuff in our heads. So we need some way, and there are lots of things that we can experience, like illusions, that we know are also in some sense a part of our heads. They're not part of the external experience of the world. So we need some way to differentiate between things we experience that are a part of the world and things that we experience that are a part of our minds. And I call that science. And so whatever science determines as a part of the external world, I call external, and whatever it determines as a part of our mind, I call internal. Now, I don't actually care whether or not these are two different substances. Dualism, monism doesn't make a difference to me. I just say there's a difference between these two things. Would you agree with all that so far?
Yeah, I get that.
You're a little quiet right now. Is your microphone far away? Did I turn the volume down or something?
Hang on. Is it on my? I haven't changed anything. Wait.
All right. Yeah, I just probably hit the volume button or something.
Perhaps you. In all honesty, you sound a little bit different. Just like the audio sounds a little bit different. I don't know what it is.
Is that a little bit better?
Yes, that's actually a lot better.
All right. So did you hear everything I said? Fine.
Yes, I did.
So you would agree that there is some distinction between stuff in our imagination and stuff in the world?
Yeah, ultimately, I can kind of see a potential problem with agreeing with this, but yes.
Oh, what's that? Go ahead, tell me.
Oh, well, essentially, the fundamental problem that I am at right now in philosophy is the distinction that has been a problem for a while, which is just the distinction between the one and the many, parts versus wholes, things like that. So, like, yes, in the sense of maybe parts or whatnot, the internal and external, we are referring to things that are in a sense different.
So that would be the distinction between ontology and epistemology. Ontology being statements about the things themselves and how they relate, and epistemology being a statement of knowledge and how we approach learning.
Right.
My position is purely epistemological. I do not care at all what the ontological categories are. These are purely just, there's an apparent difference between things and things we imagine.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that.
All right, so from that position, we can address all of these questions like, well, free will is definitely something in our heads, right? It's not something in the world as far as we can tell. Same with choices and intuitions and all these things. So why should we believe that these are fundamental things as opposed to just illusions?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last bit.
Why should we believe that free will is an actual thing rather than just an illusion produced by our experiences, just like optical illusions or biases or fallacies, all the things that we know our brains do that aren't actually there? Why should we believe free will is a thing?
Right. Well, I think probably the biggest, maybe not the biggest reason, but the biggest, I guess, if you want to say counter to what you just said, is that there is that big disanalogy between our experience of illusions and our experience of free will. I think, in a sense, we experience, and I might be getting myself into philosophical trouble here, but we experience free will in a similar way that we experience perhaps something like sense perception. In that, not in the sense that it is determined or something like sense perception is, but in the sense that when I look at a book or something, or most things, when I look at like my wall, I really have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that like this thing is really there. That's at least how I experience it. That this is actually really there. There's no weird thought that I'm thinking that it's like, whoa, so something seems off about that. Something seems weird. Whereas with an illusion, it is like that. When you're looking at illusions with whether it's lines that are the same length, but because of the outsides, they look like somewhat weirdly different lengths, whether it's colors that, because of the lighting, look different, even though they are kind of the same color. In all of those illusions, I would at least argue, and I mean, granted, I can't get inside the experiential realities of others, but speaking from my own experience, and I think it's reflective of all experience, that in those illusions, there is that kind of oddness about it.
Well, here, check out this picture. Can you? Oh, wow, that's annoying.
Oh,
can you see the picture on my screen right there?
Yeah.
Can you see the orange and brown squares on the top and middle of the cube?
Right, and I can already see that they're like they will turn out to be the same color.
But you don't experience that. There's not like a dissonance. If you showed this to anybody who didn't understand the illusion, they would say, yeah, those are clearly different colors. There's no dissonance in their head. There's no, like, there's something wrong. Those are just clearly
different colors. Huh. I'm losing you a bit, but I see what you mean.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Huh. I do see what you mean. That's funny. Yeah. Well. Yeah, I'm at a loss. I think you refuted my point.
Oh, thank you. That's quite a compliment.
Yeah, no problem. Huh. That's strange. I mean, I've seen things like that before, though I have to say that this is... Well, wait. Is there a second picture to this? Or no, this is just...
I just did Google Images for optical illusion.
Right. Is the difference between the orange on the like middle row of the shaded area and the seemingly brown on the top side of the lighter area, or is the illusion between the middle part on the shaded area and the seemingly brown piece that is placed on like the ground beside the square?
Here, let's check. I can just do this. Copy. Paste.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Make sure. Can you see my screen only when I'm talking, or when in both?
No, I can see it all the time.
So do you see that there's no difference between the color right there?
Yeah. None whatsoever. Nice. And okay. Yeah.
Exact same on all three of them.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good, because I just wanted to. Yeah. That confirms that confirms what I was thinking. So yeah. No. I agree with that. Huh.
Yeah, so from my position, if you really want to believe in, for me to be convinced that free will is a thing, you would actually have to give a definition of what it is. I don't think it's fair to just say it's a philosophical primitive.
I'm sorry. I think I'm
Oh, one
still
second.
losing you.
I'll check my mic stuff.
Okay. I'll also see if I can turn you up a little bit. Well, I'll just turn that up. There. Okay.
Seeing if I can hear myself.
Ooh.
Is that a little better?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
I don't know what it is, if it's internet or whatnot.
No, it's my crappy mic. I haven't got a new one since like 12 years old.
Oh.
So I have to
Oh,
like
wow.
move it or hold it in the right position so that it actually connects. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So from my position, that if you want to claim that free will is a thing, you would have to actually give a definition of it. I don't think it's fair to just call it a philosophical basic. It seems cheaty. Like you're just making it up.
Well, now I would definitely there needs to be a distinction made, because the way in which say the last thing you said.
For me, until you can give a coherent definition of free will and show how you can get out of this dilemma of either it's done for reasons or it's done for no reason, I can't really accept it because it seems to be just an arbitrary term that we just place in because it feels right.
Right. So so I think the distinction I would make, and this might even go against the way I described it before, where it wouldn't go against it, but I think I might have been a little too ambiguous before, or not making this distinction, that I think it's a primitive in the sense that in like an ontological primitive, if it's real.
Of course, if it's real.
Right, of course. Yeah, I would see it as an ontological or metaphysical primitive. But as far as defining it, like I said before, it might be that it's simply a limitation of either language itself or just my incapability to express it through language. But nevertheless, I do think that it's at least possible that you could come up with, like, you could go through the process of coming up with a definition of free will, and in that sense, the semantics of what free will means, like how you would define it, that you might not be able to end just at like freedom and you can't go any further. But what I meant is that, like, as an ontological primitive, that you can't break down freedom into further things. That's how I would see freedom. Now, granted, you would disagree, but
well, I see it like, why can't I just say that about anything that I just want to believe in? You can't break down unicorns into philosophical primitives, therefore unicorns.
Oh, well, right, of course, but that's why I'm simply stating my view on it. I wasn't trying to give like an argument in that sense right there. Yeah, no, I was just saying that is how I would view freedom, probably because of the nature of freedom, or at least my experience of freedom as being that thing that is, and I would have to go back to the words autonomous and whatnot, but it's not just the recipient of something. It's not just kind of like the effect per se. It's also, in a sense, autonomous, or it is, in a sense, the cause of a thing. And in this case, the cause of like a new chain of causation.
Let me ask it to you in a different way. Is it possible to explain all human action through deterministic means?
that goes back to, well, wait. Human behavior.
Or just anything we do, any choices we make. Is it possible to explain all these in a deterministic means? Do we need free will to explain anything?
I would think, given, I would think that it would be extremely hard for a determinist on determinism to be able to give an account of why it is that we experience this kind of autonomy or volition to do things, not just to have things done to us, but to also do things.
Well, I would just explain that as a neurological process, exactly the same as hunger or anything else. I don't think I'd have any difficulty explaining that.
Right, but by the autonomy part of it, that's what I kind of mean by like doing things, like actively being the subject and actively being the one to start, rather than having another thing that was started outside of you force you to do something.
Well, that's the illusion part. That's where the determinists would say that's like an illusion, an optical illusion of the
right.
square.
And so why think that that's an illusion? Because
we can't come up with a coherent definition of what free will could possibly be. As far as we can tell, all the possible systems of logic we have, there is no way to actually define what freedom means.
Well, but then that would in that case, the sword cuts both ways. You can't say that something is an illusion if you don't first admit what you're saying is an illusion. Or what is it that is illusory?
Well, that's exactly the question I'm asking you. I think you can't even talk about free will because there's no definition of it. I'm just going to grant the term and use it because you use it, but as far as I can tell, that's just a meaningless term.
Right, but
free will.
So if you were,
if humans have made up this illusion and called it something,
right? I think that I guess if you were to say though that it is an illusion, that free will is an illusion, that I suppose perhaps this will just involve repeating yourself, but I would just want to hear one time again why you yourself, if you were to say, like, would you say that free will is an illusion?
I'd say I don't even know what free will is. That would be my direct answer. I have no idea what you mean by free will. It is like a random combination of letters that have no meaning whatsoever. It's just something that people think have meaning, but when you really analyze it, that don't mean anything bad. It's just a random combination of letters that makes them feel good. That's it.
Okay, so if I were to appeal to your experience of, like, because I think at some level when I use words like, autonomy to do things and ability, capability, being a subject rather than an object or whatnot, regardless of whether or not I can give a kind of substantive, all-encompassing definition of what that is, I certainly think that there is some aspect of my experience and your experience and the experience of everybody that is relatable to what I'm saying. And such that, similar to religion, people can talk about, religion does this, or religion is responsible for this. And even if we cannot, perfectly make an absolutely 100% accurate, all-encompassing definition of religion, nevertheless, we know at least in a fairly decent sense what it is we are referring to.
Well, I think religion is just vague because there's lots of different interpretations of what it can mean, whereas I think free will has no definition. For example, when you talk about my experience, when I'm thinking of words or thinking of ideas, they just pop into my head. I have no control over them whatsoever.
Right.
You have no more, as Simon Harris put it, I have no more control over my thoughts than I do the next thing you're going to say. It's just going to pop into
I'm sorry, I can't really hear you.
God damn it.
I know.
Right. Is that a little bit better?
Yes.
All right, so I have no more control over the next thought I'm going to have than I do over the next thing.
I still, that last bit, I couldn't get it.
So I have no more control over what next thing I'm going to think.
Oh boy.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know what the problem is. Like every time you start talking and it's like, oh good, okay, he's got it. And then it just kind of like fade.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my mic.
It's like, no.
So I'll keep trying again, see if I can get it to work.
Yeah.
I have no more control over the next thing that I'm going to think than I do over the next thing you're going to say. It's just going to pop into my head.
I disagree with that. I really do disagree with that. I think that thoughts do pop into our heads that we have no control over. I wholeheartedly believe that. You know, literally, I just this very moment, I just tried. You know, first thing that pops into my head, a penguin popped into my head. I have no clue why a penguin just popped into my head, but it did. And that is, of course, the point you're getting at, that it's like, it just kind of, it just kind of popped in there. But I think that experientially, that is fundamentally different than my experience of choosing to stand up, to choose to walk out and go to a certain place, in the sense that the penguin popped into my head, right? And when it did, it's almost like that just it was almost like that thought was a slap in my face. Like in not not in like a rude way, but in a very just objective way, that I am simply the recipient of that thought, the thought of the penguin.
Well, how is that any different from the desire to stand up or the desire to go to the store? Aren't those just like the penguin?
Because the desires themselves are not identical with your choosing to act on those desires. That's what I think. I really believe that is true, that there is a fundamental difference between desiring to do something and doing that thing.
That's what I think the illusion is. I think that's just the illusion, like the colors. It's something that we think is there and that we can put a name to, but it doesn't really mean anything.
No, but why do you think that is an illusion? Because experientially, that does feel like a different thing has just happened. That I feel when I'm hungry or whatnot. It's like, oh man, I could really go for something to eat. That is the thing that I have no control over. That feeling, that like, I really want this inclination to go do that. But then there is, I think, a fundamentally distinct thing that we experience, which is a decision, our choosing to act on that desire, and our choosing to say, like, in response to the desire, okay, I am going to go get something. And that it's like that kind of agreement and yeah, that experience, to go along with that and to affirm that desire as something that you want to embrace or act upon, that is fundamentally different than simply, the process by which you just start feeling hungry.
I don't think that works because there's no definition of what that could possibly be. It's just, it seems to me like saying there's a square circle.
Well, wait, hang on. What was that last bit?
It seems to me like you're just saying there's a square circle. I have this experience. Can't explain it, but it exists anyway because I want it.
Well, no, it's not that. The point is that the problem of not being able to explain it, I think, comes from the determinist, in that if you want to say that, the distinction between choosing to act on your desire and just having the desire to do that, if you want to say that that is an illusion, then you've got to come to grips with why it is that those feel like completely different things. It's like, why should we immediately kind of abandon the idea? Why should we go to the idea that this is an illusion rather than just going with what I think is the properly basic experience? Similar in that respect to sense perception, where it's like, why in the world would we think that, this wall or this room I'm in really, isn't there, even though, like, I experience it being there, and like, to such a degree, it's so fundamental to my entire being and whatnot, that why would I, what reason do I have to regard that as illusory? And similarly with free will, why make the step and say that it is an illusion?
Well, let's take the example of the illusion. If you said that there are three separate colors in that picture that I showed, and I said,
Yes.
how do you define
I
these three different colors?
I didn't catch the last bit again.
Yeah, goddamn, I need a new mic.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So we see there's three different colors.
Yeah.
Or you say there's three different colors. How do you define the three different colors? How do you distinguish between them? Because when I copy and paste, they look the exact same. So there's no definition that you can use to distinguish these three. It's just an illusion.
What?
Free
Wait.
will be the same thing.
Well,
so when
right? No. What you need to, like, I get the analogy. I get the analogy to the illusion, and I get that if freedom or free will was an illusion, then it would be like that, where, I look at the illusion and I experience to myself, okay, these are three different colors and whatnot, but it turns out actually they're not three different colors; they're the same color.
That process would be me saying there is no definition of free will. Like, give me a definition. If you can't give a definition, that's like you just.
Well, no, the problem with the problem with the illusion isn't one of definition necessarily. What it is that I might have a definition, or I guess I would just say a conception of what color is and what it means for things to be the same color, and or different colors rather. And I look at that illusion and I say, okay, these seem like different colors, when in reality they are not different colors. The problem isn't one of like definition or conception of what a color is. The problem is that I've made a claim, but just as a matter of fact, the claim that I'm making is false, and we can show it's false because, like you showed, that they really are the same color. And similarly, if free will is an illusion, the problem isn't one of necessarily defining free will, even though there certainly is a a problem that I would think is somewhat separate of defining free will. That certainly is an issue. But as far as saying free will is an illusion, what that would mean is that, okay, we have this conception of free will. I think that this, conception of free will is different than the conception of me just beginning to desire something. And the person who says,
the same thing.
right, the person who says it's illusory would say, no, as a matter of fact, you are incorrect. That they are not distinct things. They are fundamentally the same thing. So it's not necessarily that the person who takes free will to be an illusion would say that, like, the problem lies in that I can't give like a precise, encompassing definition of illusion. It would just be that we have this conception of what free will is, and we think that that is different than the kind of deterministic processes that arise with desire and whatnot, when in reality, they aren't. They're all essentially the same process, the same deterministic process. That is what I think the person who says free will is illusory would be saying.
So from my perspective, I think that since you're arguing for free will, you hold the burden of proof to show what it is.
Well, right. But as well, so I suppose I got the impression that you did not, as in like you reject free will.
I don't know what it is. I have no idea. I've never heard of a current definition.
Okay. Right. When evaluating these things, I think that at least for all practical or pragmatic purposes, the issue should be about where kind of the balance of it. Is it more reasonable to think that we do have free will, or is it more reasonable to be on the side that we don't have free will? And it seems like are you on that issue kind of like a pure agnostic of I don't know? And now I grant that you're going to say that it's a matter of definition for you, and that you've never really heard a coherent definition of it. But
yeah, so like if I said, do you believe in Moogles? Or are you an agnostic to Moogles? I'm not sure.
Right, because to me, I don't even have, I just have nothing in my knowledge or experience or whatnot that even like, I don't even have an inkling of what that refers to at all. And I think that's the point you're getting at.
Exactly. And that's how I feel about free will.
Right. I would just, and man, I really don't want to sound like, what's his name? Cy-10
Bruggencate?
Whatever. Yeah.
Cy-10 Bruggencate?
Yeah, that guy. But nevertheless, at least from my subjective point of view, I find it hard to believe that you, me, or anyone could view the kind of obscurity of saying, like, let's say I say like a chondet or whatnot, just random syllables, a chondet, like that doesn't even refer to anything more than just letters and syllables and pronunciations and whatnot of the word itself. The word has no just like referent to anything that I have grasped or whatnot. It just seems made up. On the contrary, though, I definitely do think that free will and religion are a step above that, the kind of just like random string of letters and syllables, that there is definitely something within our experience and just within that we have a conception of what free will or religion is or encompasses. Even if, like I said, I can't give that definition of religion, that kind of thing that lays it out perfectly. Nevertheless, I can still say that, well, religion has something to do with, ultimate meaning. It's your worldview about life that is, there's a great tendency for that to be like based around something supernatural. It's also very moralistic, typically, just stuff like that, where it's like, I might not be able to give an absolute definitive definition of religion, but nevertheless, when we talk about religion, we do have a sense of what we're talking about. Whereas with something like D'Entrée, there isn't even a sense about that we get. That just signifies nothing to me. But unlike that, I think free will is definitely in kind of the same camp as the word religion, in that we do have these experiences of not simply being slapped in the face with
Penguins.
of decisions or stuff like that. And that's why I say that we have an experience that does seem fundamentally different and perhaps even opposite to that kind of, like the penguin popping into my head.
I see them as the same thing. Like, I see the penguin popping into my head as no different from a desire to scratch my nose. Like, if I'm
yeah, certainly the desire to scratch your nose, desire absolutely, I think, is something deterministic.
But then I would also go on to say that the action is the same. I didn't think about
why would you make that jump?
It's like when I'm sleeping or something, I don't think about scratching my nose. It's just an itch. I do it. I have no thought process. It just happens.
Well, right, but you also have no experiential reality that you've ever even done that you ever even have scratched your nose or whatnot.
No, I mean like when I'm barely awake or watching a movie or something. I don't think about scratching my nose. I just do it.
I don't know necessarily that I might agree with that completely, but shoot, I had a point I was going to make, but I can't remember it. Whatever, it's all right. Let's just.
So what do you mean you wouldn't agree with that?
Well, just that. It very well could be that, you can have kind of levels of attentiveness to things, and when you are sleeping or just barely awake and you choose to scratch your nose, I do see that as just experientially that there is a difference. You in other words, you could not scratch your nose, right? Like when you're just barely awake, even though you did scratch your nose, the experience of that was something affirmative, that it was like, okay, all right, yeah, scratch my nose. Even if you know, you don't say those things out loud, obviously, it's just completely silent. But nevertheless, it is that. It's not like you feel like anything is forcing your hand to go up and do that, despite despite you saying like, I didn't want to do that or whatnot. That when you scratch your nose, I believe that we have a very just fundamental experience that we could have not scratched our nose. That even though it might have been harder to get back to sleep, if we still have an itch in our nose, nevertheless we could still do it. And I think to deny that idea, to deny the idea that I could have not scratched my nose, that literally I was just kind of destined to scratch my nose or whatnot, that I think seems completely contrary to experience. Now, of course, there's the issue of, the relevance or the weight of experience in this discussion. But nevertheless, I guess that would be my claim, that it does, in fact, whether experience is a good barometer for truth, it does, in fact, go against experience. And I'm wondering if we could at least agree on that. Maybe not, but
Well, I think the choice is just like the penguin. It just pops into your head and happens. And action.
Sorry, I still can't hear you.
Damn it.
I know.
I'm going to unplug my mic and plug it back in. All right. Hopefully that's better.
It's better right now at this moment. It is better.
Yeah. Yeah. So I see the scratching of my nose is no different than the penguin. No different than the penguin at all. And like moving my lips isn't a choice. When I say a word, my lips just move on their own. I don't control the muscles. I don't control the muscles of my heart. Most of my physical actions are subconscious. They're completely controlled outside of my actions.
Yes, that is true.
And I think the thoughts and desires and actions of my brain are also caused in the same way by my subconscious mind. And that the perception that it's a choice is just an illusion. We know that our subconscious mind does this stuff, like we know that there's that one color in the illusion.
Right, and I guess
additional thing that's doing more stuff when we know that the subconscious can just do all of it.
Right, but why would you? I suppose that this is kind of, it might boil down to a fundamental kind of subjective difference in that I really and perhaps it's just incredulity on my part, but I have a hard time believing that someone could truly feel, truly experience that, a thought just kind of popping into their head. It is literally that literally feels the same as, what we would call making a choice to do something. Because when we make a choice, again, we aren't, when I get the penguin or a random thing popping into my head, that is just a slap in my face. Like I've said before, a slap in my head. Similarly, desire, that seems to me like, again, a slap in my head, where it's like, I don't choose. I have no prior contemplation of this desire. It just kind of pops up and it does that. But then I would say we have a fundamental experience that when these desires or whatnot or reasons come to us, they make themselves known, that we have an affirmative experience of, okay, what shall I do in response to this? What?
Well,
Yeah,
I would
go ahead.
refer to the neurological studies that have been done where they say when you make an action, press a button, and they can predict the actions 5 minutes before.
I still can't hear you.
Damn it! I'm gonna
I
get a new
know.
mic soon enough. But
Yeah,
so there's neurological studies where people are told to make a decision, and when they make a decision, they have to press a button.
right.
And study professors or whatever can predict the action 5 minutes before they make it. So when they think they've made an action, it really didn't happen. It happened 5 minutes before in your brain. Scientists can show this.
I'll say that I missed that last part, but I know the study you're referring to. And I think with that, is it, I don't know the specifics of it, but is it that when the person believes that they have made a decision, that they press this button?
Well, yeah, you have a choice. Choose one of these options and press the button. And you've made the choice.
Okay, where is the like decision aspect made in it? Is the choice literally just defined as the pressing the button?
Yes. Well, that would be one of the choices.
Or yeah, one button or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that kind of misses the point though, because on an idea of like of free will, or of whether it's substance dualism or monism, but regardless of the two of those, these things can still interact. What we would call mental, what we would call physical, can still interact. And so the actual kind of, it might be that there is a delay between, and I think there is in our experience, a delay between our intention to do something and that thing immediately happening. So and specifically also when I press the button, how is that measured? Is it measured like when the button goes down, or is it measured when my finger starts pressing down on it? Or
well, they can predict it 5 minutes ahead of time, so it doesn't make a difference.
Well, 5 milliseconds.
Minutes.
Wait, can you send me that study then? Because
yes.
if that's true, then yeah, then damn.
All right, yeah, I'll definitely find that study for you and write that down so I can
Okay,
find it later.
because in my recollection, the point was that they could predict it 5 milliseconds.
That was the original one, and they've repeated it with longer and longer timescales.
With the same, did they literally do the same of pressing the button? Like, what did they do differently? Why would it be 5 milliseconds in one and 5 minutes in another?
Better technology to read the stuff going on in the mind.
Okay. Is that legitimately what it is, or is that like probably what it is?
Over the past 15 years, we've had developments in technologies of fMRIs. So we've gained the greater ability to read what's going on in the mind on medium scales rather than really large scales or really small scales. So we've gotten a better idea of how to make those predictions.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would absolutely love to see that study, because if that's the case, that that you can predict these things 5 minutes in advance, then I very well might concede that something like determinism is true. Like legitimately, I would be willing to just say, okay, yeah. Because
I'll definitely find those. I have them. I have the talks listed from Sam Harris and V.S. Ramachandran that I mentioned. I can find those.
Okay. Yeah, that would be awesome. Because certainly, like, with the 5 millisecond difference, going back to the 5 millisecond difference,
that could just be delay in the finger twitch. So yeah,
exactly, right. And yeah, that's the point that I was gonna make. But yeah, 5 minutes in advance, you might not even have had the experience of contemplating a decision.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, granted, though, I will say that, like with the situation of itching your nose, again, I think this goes back to tendency in that desire or reason or just a random thought can provide tendency to act a certain way. But that might not be the deciding factor in that if I am in this study or whatnot, and based on the uh, neurological stuff going on in my head, that it can be predicted in advance that I will choose this button rather than this other button. I'm curious if that was a kind of thing that they found a tendency that they were better able to actually predict what the person would press, that it made a difference, or if literally they could say, like, with 100% accuracy or virtually 100% accuracy, based on the workings of the brain, that this person would do this. Because if it was merely something that was, like, it should be any random person should be able to guess 50-50, but we were able to guess 80% or something like that, I still think that would not necessarily go to even shed any doubt on free will, because
it wouldn't be proof, but you could say that about anything. We can't prove anything with
no, but my point is that if it was something like an 80% thing, if we have a desire to do something and there is no kind of, like, we have no reason in our thinking why we would go against this desire. So, like, if I'm in bed and I am kind of half awake, half asleep, and my nose itches, you can probably, I would admit that you could predict that my nose would feel like there was an itch there. And you could predict that if you know how the body works well enough in relation to the context that I'm in. And you can say, okay, yes, I am going to feel an itch in my nose, sometime in the future. Let's say like 30 seconds in the future, I am going to feel, or you are going to feel an itch in your nose.
I think they tried to filter that out by using neutral options. Just pick a random shape or a random letter or something. But you could say that about anything. You could say that there's always a chance that there's some other factor, correlation with causation.
No, well, it's not that there's something else that is kind of like, I don't know, factoring into your decision. What I'm getting at is that if I have a desire or an inclination or whatnot, however minor it is, and I have absolutely no reason, to my mind at least, no reason to the contrary of why I wouldn't act upon that kind of desire or whatnot, then it makes obvious sense that I would clearly, if that's the only thing, then I would, if it's scratching the nose, I would scratch my nose. And even if, we're talking about pressing buttons or whatnot, if it is something that they could predict, say, 80% of the time what the person was going to press, it very well might be the case that, in those situations, oftentimes you just have to make a kind of, well, what seems to you like a random decision. But yeah, it very well could be that there is a kind of, path within you, neurological path, that because of how that's working, you will, when the time comes, you will desire to hit the right button rather than the left one. But then you are confronted with that desire, and then it will be your decision to act on that or not. Now, in the case of the pressing the two buttons, the point that I was getting at is that there's no restraint there. You're literally, the point is, okay, the first desire that pops into my head, the first tiny bit of an inclination to prefer one button rather than the other, I'm going to immediately press that button.
Think about it this way. Imagine you think that flipping a switch causes the light to turn on.
Yes.
But you could always say that maybe flipping the switch has nothing to do with the light. Has nothing.
I still can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I really
yeah. I also think maybe if we wanted to wrap this up in the next maybe 10 minutes, that might be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a new way we can continue later? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you think a light switch turns a light on.
I still can't hear you.
If you think a switch turns a light on.
Oh my gosh, I still can't hear you every time. Every time it's like I can start hearing you for a second and then it fades off.
Can you see the chat box on the right-hand side?
Yes.
I gotta try typing it in there. That'll probably work.
Oh, I mean, that's fair. You can try saying it.
If you think a switch turns the light on.
Right.
Could be the case, like 80% of the time. It could be the case that there's a leprechaun that turns the light on, and you're confused, and you just don't know it.
Well, no. The case with the light switch is that 100% of the time, unless there is some kind of electrical malfunction, 100% of the time when I flip the switch on, the light will come on.
Let's say it is 80%.
Right. Yeah. If it was 80%, then we would say that no, there is not some kind of it is not true that I can generalize that when I turn on the light, it will in fact turn on. And then that would lead you to say, okay, well, wait. Why can't it do that? If it was purely deterministic, that's the thing. If it really was, if we can see the electrical wires running every relevant detail, running up to the light, and we're in exactly the same situation, and I flip the switch on and it goes on, I flip it off, flip it on, it still goes on, flip it off, flip it on, but this time it doesn't go on. Even though everything about the electrical circuits or whatnot was like there's nothing broken or whatnot, then we would rightly ask, like, okay, wait. Why is that only turning on sometimes and not all the time?
But isn't that true of all of science? Like medical drugs and things only work some % of the time.
I suppose I'm failing to see how that's...
Well, all of science is inductive. It only
right.
So the evidence of the brain being deterministic would be inductive, but it would still be evidence that it was deterministic. It wouldn't be reasonable to just insert.
It would be, if it was something like 80%, somewhere around there, it would be evidence of a kind of tendency. It would be evidence of something more than just pure chance or randomness, that there would be a tendency or something. But determinism, or if you want to say that every time this happens, this also happens, or like we can tell when we look at the brain that later you are going to do this, and they do that and they get it right 80% of the time. What I'm saying is that it's empirically equivalent The hypothesis that we are, determined by just completely determined by our brain, and that we just kind of maybe missed one or two relevant factors, and that's why we got 80%. That is supported just as much as the idea that, okay, yeah, there are some kind of tendency making things within us. But
Well, I would say that because the determinism theory made the prediction, it has more support. And it's just a post hoc explanation of the evidence.
Well, but it's reasonable though, right? After further analysis, you can see that if, we can ask the question, what would be the case? Like if substance dualism or something like that, or monism especially, if one of those were true, and we are this kind of complex combination of what may or may not be two fundamentally different substances, and we are, manipulating one of the aspects of that, or we're looking at it and we're realizing that when these physical things are doing what they do in this way, people generally, we have a generally better idea than just random probability of what button this person is going to pick.
And let's think about it like this. If I saw a cup fall over and I thought a mouse did it, I could say we will see mouse droppings around the cup. But if we don't see any,
I still can't hear you. I hate every time I say that. I feel so bad. I like.
All right, can you see the text on the?
Oh, yeah, I can.
I just copied and pasted that. So.
Okay, phew. I was gonna say.
Mad typing skills.
Yeah.
So I'll just try and say it, and you can read along if I cut out. But if we see a cup fall over and I think a mouse did it,
right?
I would expect mouse droppings around the cup, but we don't find any. I can use ad hoc reasoning and say, well, maybe the wind blew all the mouse droppings away to justify my theory. But if I said the wind knocked it over, and so we won't find any mouse droppings, the wind is a better explanation, wouldn't it? Right?
So, hang on. I'm gonna read.
All right.
Right. Okay, for example, maybe. Oh. I think the reason why you would prefer the explanation of a mouse versus something like a fairy or whatnot is that the mouse is a very common thing. It would not be surprising whatsoever if we saw this and they look just like mouse turds, and we think, okay, probably a mouse came and did this, because one, it's exactly what we would expect with a mouse, and also mouses are very, very just common things that we're very well aware of.
Sure, but let's not use the example of fairies. Just use like the wind or a mouse.
So
a wind knocked over the cup versus a mouse knocked over the cup.
Oh, well then, and so the wind does that, and then the mouse comes over and defecates afterwards, is what
exactly. So you can
Right.
always use ad hoc reasoning.
No. But I think those are empirically equivalent. I think you can't know if the mouse knocked over the cup. You can know that the mouse was there, certainly because of the turd. But I just think they're empirically equivalent. You can't prefer one over the other.
Unless one of them can make a prediction that you can verify in the future.
Sure, but in this case, what prediction could that possibly be? This was a one-time thing.
So for determinism, we can say we can predict the actions by looking at the brain.
Right.
And
Right.
free will probably wouldn't make that prediction.
What I think, what I'm inclined to believe is that if free will is true, that is perfectly consistent with tendencies. It is not consistent with kind of like 100% determinacies. Certainly, if we can, that's why I say, if we can make predictions, and those are constantly verified, that whenever these criteria are met, I will act this way, then yeah, I think that's good evidence against free will. But that's why I'm saying if it's something like 80%, that reduces it down to, at the very most, a tendency. Now, it could be that it is deterministic and we're simply missing something, but it could just as well be the idea of a tendency. And so those two are empirically equivalent in that sense.
Do you know what the problem of underdetermination is?
Of what? Underdetermination?
Yep.
No.
There are infinitely many ways, infinitely many equally theories to explain anything. You can always make them up.
What, equally as many what theories to explain anything?
Equally as many empirically supported theories to explain anything. You can always make them up.
Well, I mean, empirically supported or like equivalent?
Equivalent. Yeah, I was trying to remember the word you were using.
That's fine.
So there are infinitely many equivalent theories for anything.
Yes.
And the way we determine the best is the one that makes predictions. The predictions
okay.
Generalization.
I lost that last bit, but I got the best ones are the ones that make predictions.
And those predictions will always be generalizations. 80%. You're never going to get 100%. It doesn't happen in science.
Right, but if someone wants to say, this is why I say they're empirically equivalent, not necessarily that one is better than the other. And I'm saying that if you want to say that determinism is true, that might, getting 80% might give you better evidence than if you simply got 50%, which might be more disconfirming of determinism. But you can't, because the two are empirically equivalent in that respect. Like the point is that both make predictions. So me having free will with tendencies, what would I expect? Versus me being determined, what would I expect? And what we see, at least if it is 80% or somewhere around there, some kind of significant number that isn't, 100%, what we would see is that they very well both might predict the same thing. That's kind of the problem. They literally, it's like it doesn't, showing the 80% doesn't give you any more reason to think that determinism is true than the idea of just like, this is exactly what we would expect given free will plus tendencies.
Would you mind watching my most recent video?
Oh, that's fine. I would love to, especially if it's relevant to what I've said.
Yeah, that's literally the topic. And
yeah,
I'm going to buy a new mic in the meantime. So can we take a break here? And
yeah,
let me know when your
next
free time is so we can do this again, because this was a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, and it's I also got to say, just to end it off here. I very much appreciate your, well, one, sincerity, but also respectfulness. Like I really appreciate that, because on both sides, I mean, both theists and atheists do it, but you always get those people who are just like, you know, saying, "Oh, you idiot, like this is so stupid, obviously your position is horribly wrong." And it's like, okay, you can say I'm wrong, but you don't have to call me stupid. And I'm, so that's why it's like,
Yeah, I appreciate. Yeah,
yeah, it's nice being respectful, and I'm thankful that you're respectful like that. It's really cool.
yeah. Thanks for you being respectful as well. I really enjoy having these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Here,
you also seem like a person who really, really knows their stuff.
Oh, thank you. You too.
Yeah, thank you.
So here's the title of the video that the most recent one I posted.
Okay.
On fallen cups and devious fairies thing.
Oh, whoa. Oh, sweet. Let's see, on fallen cups and devious fairies. Yes. Oh wait, yeah, no, I literally. Oh, I know that. Wow, I could have guessed that. I went to your channel a little before the conversation. Let's see. Hey, what the heck? TJump. Why can't I? Oh, also, just so you know, when I search TJump on YouTube, what comes up is like it thinks that I wanted to say Trump.
Oh yeah, I noticed. I tried that too. It's hilarious.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that.
Yeah, I just do TJump atheism. That's usually what gets it.
Oh yeah, that would do it. Wait. Okay, hang on. Fairies.
There's atheism TJump. Do it in that order, and my like the second one or the first one.
Nice. All right. Let's see. Yeah, right there on fallen cups and devious fairies. Yeah, that was the first thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, certainly I will watch that. Yeah, and I, you know, because these things go on for a fair amount of time. Like, I mean, this went on for about 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I, at least where I am right now, I've got a lot of stuff to do. So, you know, I don't know the frequency of how, like, often I'd be able to do something like this. But that said, I really enjoy it. So,
yeah, I'll just send you another message on one of your videos and check in every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be perfect. Yeah. All right, great.
All right, it was nice talking with you. I will see you later.
Yeah, it was nice talking to you. See ya.